You can't marry him. That was the moment everything broke, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet fracture running straight through the life I thought I had already rebuilt. And the worst part was how familiar his voice still felt, like it had been waiting somewhere inside me all this time. Untouched, unchanged, dangerous in the way memories are when you pretend they don't exist. And when I turned, slowly, like maybe if I delayed it long enough he wouldn't actually be there, Lucas Grant was standing at the back of the room in a perfectly tailored suit, calm, composed, like he hadn't disappeared from my life 2 years ago with a polite goodbye and a promise that we were both better off this way. Like he hadn't been the one to teach me how to let go without making a scene. And now here he was, looking at me like nothing between us had ever really ended, like the space I had carefully built around his absence meant nothing at all. And for a second, just 1 second, I forgot how to breathe because my brain was still trying to reconcile the version of him I had buried with the one standing 10 feet away, very much real, very much here, and completely uninvited. Lucas, I said, or maybe I thought it. I couldn't tell anymore because the room had gone strangely quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to snap, and he didn't smile, didn't soften, didn't do anything except take a single step forward, measured, controlled, the way he always moved when he already knew how this would end. And that's when he said it, simple, steady, impossible to ignore. You're already married. To me. The words didn't hit all at once. They seeped in slowly, like cold water through fabric, uncomfortable before they were devastating. And I almost laughed because it had to be a joke. It had to be some kind of misunderstanding, because we ended things cleanly, didn't we? We talked it through. We agreed. We were adults about it. No yelling, no broken plates, no dramatic exits. Just a quiet understanding that whatever we had wasn't enough anymore. That love, or whatever we used to call it, had simply run out. And I built my entire life on that assumption. I moved on. I healed. I convinced myself that what we had was real but finished, something I could look back on without it hurting, something safe, something closed. And now he was standing there unraveling all of it with one sentence. That's not funny. I managed, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be, but Lucas didn't react, didn't argue, didn't push. He just reached into his jacket pocket with that same controlled calm and pulled out a folded document. The kind that shouldn't matter. The kind that somehow suddenly did. And when he held it out to me, there was something in his eyes that made my chest tighten before I even touched it. Like he already knew what it would do to me. Like he had been carrying this moment for a long time. And my fingers hesitated just a second before taking it. Because some part of me already knew, already felt the ground shifting under my feet. Already sensed that whatever was written on that paper wasn't just going to complicate things. It was going to change everything. And as I unfolded it, the room faded into background noise, voices distant, faces blurred, until there was only the paper, the ink, the official seal stamped at the bottom like something permanent, something undeniable, and the line that mattered more than anything else, the line that shouldn't have been there but was clear as day. No termination filed, no dissolution recorded, no end, just a beginning that had never been properly closed. And suddenly my past wasn't behind me anymore. It was standing right in front of me, breathing, waiting, refusing to be ignored. And Lucas leaned in just enough for his voice to reach me through the noise, softer now, almost gentle, almost like the man I used to know. We never finished it, Ethan, he said, and my name on his lips felt like something I wasn't ready to hear again. You just left. The paper does not feel real in my hands. It feels too light for something that just collapsed my entire life. Like it should weigh more, like it should come with a warning label, or at least a moment to prepare, but it does not. It just sits there, quiet and official and devastatingly calm, while my mind starts racing in every direction. At once, trying to find the mistake, the loophole, the missing piece that would make this make sense, because there has to be one. There always is. Things do not just stay unfinished for 2 years without someone noticing, without me noticing. And yet here it is, undeniable, stamped and signed and very much still active. And I hear my name being called from somewhere to my left. My fiancé, confusion sharp in his voice, asking if everything is okay, asking who Lucas is, and I open my mouth to answer, but nothing comes out because how do you explain something you do not even understand yourself? How do you tell someone that the life you promised them might be built on a technicality you never knew existed? And Lucas does not rush me. He never does. He just stands there like he has all the time in the world, like he already knows I will come to the same conclusion he did, and that somehow makes it worse. This is not possible, I finally say, my voice low, more to myself than to him. But he hears it anyway. Of course he does. He always did hear the things I try to keep quiet. It is, he replies simply. No emotion, no edge, just certainty. And I hate that. I hate how steady he sounds when everything inside me is starting to shake. We filed everything. I insist. Even though the memory already feels slippery, like something I told myself enough times that it became truth without ever being checked. We agreed. And there it is, that word again. Agreed, like agreement. Automatically meant completion, like talking something through meant it was done, and Lucas tilts his head slightly, watching me with that same unreadable expression that used to drive me insane. We talked about it, he says, correcting me without raising his voice. You packed your things, you said it was better this way, and then you left. Each word lands softer than it should, but somehow hits harder because of it. Because there is no accusation in his tone, just facts, clean and precise. And I feel something twist in my chest as flashes of that night come back, not all at once, but in fragments. The quiet apartment, the way we both avoided raising our voices like we were afraid that if we did it, would turn into something we could not take back. The way I kept saying we would be fine, that we were mature enough to end things without making it ugly, and he did not fight me. That is the part that stings the most now. He did not fight me. He just watched me walk out like he was waiting for something I never gave him. And I swallow hard, forcing myself back to the present because I cannot afford to get lost in that right now. Not here. Not with everyone watching. Why now? I ask, finally. Looking up at him. Really looking this time. Trying to read something in his face. Anything that explains why he chose this moment, this day, this exact second to bring this back into my life. And for the first time there is a flicker of something in his eyes, something small but undeniable. Not anger, not exactly, but not indifference either, because you were about to pretend it never existed, he says quietly. And the words hit like a truth I do not want to admit, because he is not entirely wrong. I built a clean ending out of something unfinished. I told myself it was over because it was easier than checking, easier than asking, easier than facing whatever might have still been there. And now it is here anyway, standing right in front of me, asking to be dealt with. And I realize with a sinking clarity that this is not just about a missing signature or a forgotten document. This is about everything we left unresolved, everything we chose not to say, everything I walked away from, thinking it would stay behind me. And Lucas takes a small step closer, not enough to touch, not enough to cross any visible boundary, but enough that I can feel his presence again, familiar and unsettling all at once. We need to fix it, he says, calm, controlled, like this is just another problem to solve, like it is that simple. But nothing about this feels simple anymore. Not when the past is standing this close. Not when the future I planned is suddenly uncertain, and not when part of me, a part one thought I buried, is starting to wonder what fixing it actually means. The word fix hangs in the air between us like something deceptively simple, like tightening a loose screw or correcting a typo. But nothing about this feels small or easy, and I let out a breath I did not realize I was holding, forcing my fingers to fold the paper back together just to give my hands something to do, something steady, because everything else is not. Everything else is shifting too fast. Fix it how? I ask, and my voice sounds calmer than I feel, which is ironic because that is exactly how we used to be. Calm on the surface, everything important buried underneath where it could not cause a scene, where it could not be messy or inconvenient. And Lucas watches me for a second like he is measuring something, like he is deciding how much truth I can handle at once. We file for divorce properly, he says, direct, practical, like he has already mapped out the steps in his head, like this is just unfinished business to him, something to close neatly, and that should make me feel better. It should give me relief, but instead it leaves this strange hollow space in my chest, because part of me expected something else, something less clean, something more complicated, and I hate that I expected that. So that is it, I say, almost testing the words as they leave my mouth. We sign, we file, and then it is actually over this time. And there is a brief pause, barely noticeable, but I catch it, I always catch the small things with him, and his gaze shifts just slightly before returning to mine. Steady again, controlled again. That is the idea, he answers, and the way he says it does not quite match the words. There is something underneath it, something unsaid, something that feels like it has been sitting there for a long time, waiting, and it makes it harder to breathe for a completely different reason now, because suddenly this is not just about ending something. It is about admitting that it never really ended in the first place. And behind me I hear my fiancé again, closer this time. His confusion turning into something sharper, something that demands an answer. Ethan, what is going on? And I close my eyes for half a second because this is the part one cannot delay anymore. The part where reality catches up to me, where I have to acknowledge that this is not just my past showing up. It is colliding directly with my present. And when I turn to face him, the words feel heavy in my throat, unfamiliar and wrong. I need a minute, I say, which is not an answer, but it is all I can give right now. And his expression tightens, hurt flickering across his face before he steps back, giving me space I am not sure I deserve. And that only makes it worse, because I hate that I am the one causing confusion now. I hate that I am the one bringing uncertainty into something that was supposed to be certain. And when I turn back to Lucas, the room feels smaller somehow, like everything outside of this moment has faded away, leaving just the two of us and everything we never resolved. You could have told me sooner, I say quietly, because that part matters, that part sticks. You knew, did not you? And this time he does not answer immediately, his jaw tightening just slightly, the only visible crack in his otherwise composed demeanor. I found out months ago, he admits, and there it is, that shift, that change in the air that makes everything sharper. Months. I repeat, the word landing heavier than I expect, because that means he had time to decide, time to act, time to tell me. And he did not. And something inside me stirs, something that feels dangerously close to the frustration I thought I left behind. So you just waited, I say, and now there is an edge in my voice I cannot quite smooth out. You knew I was building a new life, and you said nothing. And for the first time since he walked in, something in Lucas's expression changes more visibly. Not anger, not defensiveness, but something quieter and more complicated, something that makes my chest tighten again. I was going to handle it, he says, and the words are careful, deliberate, but they do not answer the question I am really asking, and we both know it. And the silence that follows feels heavier than anything that has been said so far, because it is filled with everything we are still not saying, everything that matters more than the paperwork, more than the technicality, more than the fact that legally we are still bound in a way neither of us fully understood until now. And I realize with a slow, sinking clarity that fixing this is not just about signing a document. It is about reopening something we never properly closed, and I do not know if I am ready for that. But the way Lucas is looking at me, steady and unrelenting, makes it feel like I might not have a choice. The silence stretches just a little too long, thick and uncomfortable, like something waiting to break, and I realize I cannot stand here any longer pretending this is a small problem that can be solved with a few signatures and a quiet conversation. Because it is not small, it is standing in the middle of my life and refusing to be ignored. And Lucas is still watching me like he expects me to understand something I have not quite caught up to yet. You are going to handle it, I repeat, slower this time, testing the weight of his words, trying to figure out where I fit into that plan, if I fit into it at all. And he nods once, minimal, controlled, like always. I did not want to complicate things for you, he says, and that almost makes me laugh. Not because it is funny, but because it is so perfectly him, so consistent with the way he always made decisions for both of us without asking. Convinced he was protecting me, convinced he knew what was best, and maybe back then I let him. Maybe back then it was easier to follow his lead than to question it. But now it just feels like another thing left unsaid, another choice made without me. You mean you did not want to tell me? I correct quietly, and there is no sharpness in my tone this time. Just something tired, something that has been building longer than I realized. And his jaw tightens again. That small tell I remember too well. I was going to fix it before it affected you, he says, and there it is again, that word. Fix, like everything between us can be reduced to a problem to solve. And something in me pushes back against that, because this was never just a problem, it was a relationship, It was something that mattered, even if we both pretended it ended cleanly. It already affected me, I say, holding his gaze, refusing to look away this time. Because if I do, I might fall back into the version of myself that let things slide, that accepted half answers and quiet exits, and I am not that person anymore. Or at least I am trying not to be. And for a moment neither of us speaks, the noise of the room slowly creeping back and around us, reminding me that we are not alone, that this is not just between us anymore. And that thought hits harder than anything else so far, because I am not just dealing with Lucas, I am dealing with everything I built after him. Everything I told myself was separate, stable, real, and now all of it feels uncertain in a way I do not know how to fix, and I run a hand through my hair. The motion automatic, grounding, trying to organize thoughts that refuse to stay still. So what now? I ask, because that is the only question that matters, not the past, not the mistakes, not even the reasons. Just what happens next. And Lucas exhales slowly, like he has been holding something back, like he has been choosing his words carefully from the moment he walked in. Now we deal with it properly, he says, steady again. But there is something under it, something I cannot quite name, something that does not match the simplicity of his plan, and I narrow my eyes slightly. Because I know him, I know when he is leaving something out, when he is simplifying something that is not simple at all. And that is all this is to you. I ask, softer now, more dangerous in its quietness, just something to deal with. And that is when it happens, the smallest shift, the briefest crack in his composure, something flickering across his face that does not belong to the calm, controlled version of him he is showing everyone else. And it has gone almost as quickly as it appears, but I see it, I feel it, and it settles somewhere deep in my chest like a question I am not sure I want answered. Because if this is just paperwork, just a mistake, then it should be easy. It should be clean. It should be over the moment we decide it is. But nothing about the way he is standing here, nothing about the way he is looking at me, feels like something that is ready to end. And that realization is far more unsettling than anything written on that document. Because it means this might not be as simple as fixing a legal error. It might be something neither of us ever actually finished, and I do not know if I am ready to face what that really means. The question lingers between us longer than it should, heavier than it has any right to be, and I can feel it settling into the space we never cleared, pressing against everything we left unfinished, and Lucas does not answer immediately, which tells me more than any words could, because he has always been quick with solutions, quick with logic, quick with anything that keeps things controlled and contained. But this time he hesitates, just enough for me to notice, just enough for something in my chest to tighten in a way I am not prepared for, and I hate that I notice. I hate that after everything I still read him this easily. No, he says finally, quieter now, and that single word shifts something, subtle but undeniable, like a door cracking open just enough to let something reel through. It is not just that. And I swallow, because I was not sure what I expected him to say, but it was not that. It was not an admission that there is more here than paperwork, more than a mistake, more than something that can be fixed with a signature and a file. And suddenly the room feels even smaller, like the walls have moved in just a little closer, like the air is thinner, and I become painfully aware of how close we are standing, not touching, not crossing any obvious line, but close enough that I can feel the familiarity of him again, the way his presence used to anchor me and unsettle me at the same time. And I take a small step back without meaning to, just to create space, just to remind myself that things are different now, that they have to be. Then what is it? I ask, and my voice is steadier than I feel. But there is something under it now, something that sounds dangerously like I want an answer, like I am not just asking out of obligation anymore. And Lucas notices, of course he does, his gaze sharpening slightly as if he recognizes that shift, as if he has been waiting for it. And that thought alone makes my pulse pick up in a way I do not like. It is unfinished, he says, choosing each word carefully, like he knows exactly how much weight they carry, and I let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but not quite, because that word again, unfinished, feels too accurate, too precise, like it cuts straight through everything I have been telling myself for the past 2 years. We ended it. I insist, even though the conviction is not as strong as it used to be, even though the memory is starting to feel less solid the more I look at it. We said we would move on. And Lucas nods slightly, not disagreeing, not correcting, just acknowledging, which somehow makes it worse, because he is not arguing with me. He is letting me hear my own words and realize what they are missing. You said that. He replies quietly, and there is no accusation in it, just truth, simple and unembellished, and it lands harder than anything else so far, because I remember it now. I remember how certain I sounded, how final it felt when I said it. Like if I declared it clearly enough it would become reality, like saying it out loud would make it true for both of us. And I did not wait for his answer. I did not ask if he agreed. I just assumed. I just walked away with that conclusion already decided. And something in my chest twists uncomfortably at that realization, because it means I might have been the one to close something that was never actually finished, and the thought sits heavy in my mind, unsettling and difficult to ignore. And Lucas takes another small step forward, careful, deliberate, like he is testing the space between us, like he is making sure I do not pull away again. And this time I do not. I stay where I am, even though every instinct tells me I should create distance, that I should keep this clean and simple and contained, because that is what I am supposed to do now. That is what moving on looks like. But nothing about this feels clean anymore. Nothing about this feels simple. If it was over, he continues, his voice low enough that it barely carries beyond us, then why does this still matter? And the question is not loud, not forceful, but it lands with a weight I cannot ignore, because it is not just about the document. It is not just about the legal tie that neither of us realized was still there. It is about the fact that I am standing here, heart racing, mind spinning, reacting in a way that feels far too immediate for something that was supposed to be finished, and I do not have an answer for that. Not one that makes sense, not one that fits the version of my life I have been building. And that realization unsettles me more than anything else so far, because it means this is not just about fixing a mistake. It is about facing something I thought I had already left behind, and I am not sure I am ready to do that. But the way Lucas is looking at me now, steady and searching, makes it feel like I might not be able to avoid it any longer. For a moment I cannot answer him, not because I do not want to, but because I do not know how. And that realization settles into me slowly, uncomfortably, like something I should have noticed a long time ago, but chose not to. And the silence between us stretches again, quieter this time but heavier, filled with everything his question stirred up, because he is right in a way I cannot easily dismiss. If it was truly over, then none of this should matter. Not the paper, not his presence, not the way my chest feels too tight for a room that has not changed size, and I look down at the document still in my hands. The edge is slightly bent now from how tightly I have been holding it, and it feels less like proof of a mistake and more like a mirror reflecting something I have been avoiding, something I told myself was resolved when it was not. And I exhale slowly, trying to steady myself, trying to find the version of this situation that makes sense, the version where I can walk away again, without it following me this time. It matters because it is real. I say finally, choosing something safe, something factual, because that is easier than admitting anything else, because legally it was never finished. And Lucas watches me carefully, like he is weighing my words, like he can see the part one I'm leaving out even if I am not saying it. And he nods once, acknowledging it without agreeing, without letting me hide behind it completely. That is part of it, he says, and there is something almost frustrating about how calm he is, how steady, like he has already processed all of this while I am still trying to catch up, and it makes me feel off balance in a way I do not like. And the other part, I press, because I cannot let him leave it there, not when he is the one who brought this back into my life, not when he is the one who chose this moment. And for a second his gaze shifts, just slightly, like he is considering whether to answer, whether to say something he has kept to himself until now. And I feel my pulse pick up again, anticipation mixing with something I cannot quite name, something that feels too close to hope for a situation that should not involve it. And then he exhales, a small, controlled release of breath. The other part is that we never actually ended anything, he says, and the words land with a quiet certainty that cuts deeper than if he had raised his voice, because he is not arguing, he is not trying to convince me, he is stating something he believes to be true, and I shake my head almost immediately, instinctive, defensive, because that challenges everything I have built since then, everything I have told myself about that night, about us. We did, I insist, But even as I say it, the memory shifts again, details slipping out of place, the edges less defined than I want them to be, and I can see it now more clearly, not just what I said, but what I did not wait to hear, the way I filled the silence with my own conclusions, the way I decided for both of us that it was over because it felt easier than staying, easier than asking questions I was not ready to hear the answers to. And Lucas steps a little closer. Again, not enough to crowd me, but enough that I can feel the familiarity of his presence settling in around me, grounding and unsettling at the same time. You left, he repeats softly, not accusing, just reminding, and the simplicity of it makes it harder to argue, because that part is undeniable. I did leave. I did walk away with the ending already decided in my head, and now I am standing here realizing that I might have been the only one who thought it was finished, and the weight of that settles into my chest, heavy and uncomfortable, because it means this is not just a legal issue. It is not just something we can fix with paperwork. It is something we never actually resolved, something that has been sitting there, unfinished, waiting, and I look at him again. Really look this time, searching for something in his expression that explains why he is here, why he waited, why now. And for the first time I see it more clearly, not just control, not just calm, but something underneath it, something that feels a little too intentional to be coincidence. And that thought sends a different kind of tension through me, sharper, more focused. You could have filed without me. I say slowly, because that part does not add up. It has been sitting in the back of my mind since he said he knew months ago. If this was just paperwork, you could have handled it already. And this time he does not look away, does not deflect, does not pretend it is simple. He just meets my gaze directly. And there is something in his eyes now that was not there before, something that feels deliberate, something that feels like a choice. I could have, he admits. And the pause that follows is not empty. It is filled with meaning, filled with something that settles between us like a truth waiting to be acknowledged. But I did not want to. The words land slower than anything else he has said, quieter but heavier, like they were always there waiting to be spoken, and now that they are, there is no way to pretend they do not matter, and I feel something in my chest tighten in response, sharp and immediate, because this is the first time he has admitted it outright, not just with silence or hesitation, but clearly, deliberately. And it shifts everything in a way I cannot easily undo. You did not want to. I repeat, and the phrase feels different in my mouth, like it carries more weight than it should, like it is not just an explanation but a choice. And Lucas does not look away, does not soften it, does not try to reframe it into something easier to accept. He just stands there, steady and certain, like he has already accepted what that means, even if I have not. And the room around us fades again, voices blending into background noise, movement blurring at the edges, because suddenly none of it feels as important as this moment, this conversation, this realization that this is not just about something we forgot to finish. It is about something he chose not to end, and that difference matters more than I want it to. Why? I ask, and my voice is quieter now, not sharp, not defensive, just searching, because I need to understand this. I need to know what part of this is about the past, and what part is something else entirely. And there is a brief pause, not long, not hesitant, just enough for him to consider how much he is willing to say. And when he speaks again, his voice is lower, more controlled, like he is keeping something in check, because it did not feel finished, he says, and the simplicity of it makes it harder to argue, harder to dismiss, because it is not dramatic, it is not exaggerated, it is just honest. And I let out a breath I did not realize I was holding, my grip tightening slightly on the folded paper in my hands, because that answer is not enough, and somehow too much at the same time. That is not a reason, I say, but even as I say it, I know it is. I know it is the exact kind of reason we use to avoid, the kind that does not fit into logic or clean conclusions, the kind that lingers, unresolved, because it does not have a clear solution. And Lucas's gaze shifts just slightly, something flickering there again, something I am starting to recognize as the part of him he does not show easily. It is, he replies quietly, and there is something firm in it now, something that does not leave room for dismissal. It is just not the kind you want. And that lands deeper than I expect. Because he is right again, I want something simple, something clean, something that fits into the life I have been building, something that lets me close this chapter without reopening everything attached to it. But that is not what this is. That is not what he is offering. And I feel the tension settle deeper into my chest. Not sharp anymore, but constant. Like a low hum I cannot ignore, and I glance down at the paper again. At the official lines and signatures that feel less important now then. The space between us, less significant than the things we are not saying out loud. And I realize with a slow, uncomfortable clarity that this is no longer just about what needs to be fixed. It is about what was never resolved. What was left hanging because neither of us knew how to deal with it at the time. And Lucas takes another small step closer, careful, deliberate, like he is aware of the line he is approaching. Like he knows I could pull away if he moves too fast. And this time I do not move. I stay where I am. Even though every instinct tells me to create distance, to protect the version of my life that felt stable just minutes ago. Because something about this moment feels too important to step away from, too significant to ignore, and his voice lowers slightly when he speaks again. Just enough that it feels more private, more direct. If it was just a mistake, he says, his eyes steady on mine, I would have fixed it already. And the implication settles between us, clear and undeniable, because that means this is not just about the paperwork, not just about a legal tie that slipped through the cracks. It is about something he chose to keep, something he was not ready to let go of. And the realization hits harder than anything else so far, because it forces me to confront a question I have been avoiding since the moment he walked in, one that feels far more complicated than I am ready to handle. And I feel my pulse pick up again, not from confusion this time, but from something deeper, something that feels dangerously close to the truth I have been trying not to see. And I meet his gaze fully, no more distance, no more deflection, because if this is not just about ending something, then I need to know what it is, even if I am not ready for the answer. There is a shift in the air that I cannot ignore anymore, something subtle but undeniable, like the moment before a storm actually breaks, and I feel it settle into my chest, steady and heavy, because this is no longer about confusion or misunderstanding. This is something else entirely, something intentional, and I find myself holding his gaze longer than I should, longer than is safe, searching for something I cannot quite name, but know I need to see. And Lucas does not look away, does not retreat. He meets it fully, like he has been waiting for me to reach this point. This exact moment where I stop pretending this is simple. And that realization alone sends a quiet tension through me, because it means none of this is accidental. None of this is just bad timing or overlooked paperwork. It is a choice, his choice, and I feel my fingers tighten slightly around the document still in my hand. The edges pressing into my skin like a reminder that this is real, that I cannot step back from it now. So what are you saying? I ask, and my voice is quieter than before, not sharp, not defensive, just focused. Because I need clarity now. I need something solid to stand on before everything shifts any further. And Lucas exhales slowly, like he has been holding something back this entire time and is finally deciding to let it surface. And when he speaks, his voice is lower, more deliberate, like each word matters in a way the others did not. I am saying I did not end it because I was not ready to, he says, and the honesty in that hits differently than anything else he has said so far. Because it is not logical, it is not controlled, it is personal, and it lands somewhere deeper than I am prepared for. And I feel my breath catch slightly before I can stop it, because that is not the answer I expected, not the one I prepared for. And it disrupts the version of this situation I was trying to hold on to, the version where this could still be resolved cleanly, without anything lingering underneath it. Not ready. I repeat, and the words feel unfamiliar. Like they do not belong in the context of everything else he has been saying, everything else that sounded so certain, so resolved. And Lucas nods once, his expression steady but no longer distant, no longer detached. There is something present now, something that was not there before, something that feels far too real. You walked away like it was already over, he continues, and there is no accusation in his tone, just a quiet statement of fact, but it still lands heavy. Because I remember that. I remember how final it felt when I left, how convinced I was that it was the right decision, the only decision, and I did not look back. I did not give either of us the chance to question it. And hearing it now, from his perspective, shifts that memory in a way I am not entirely comfortable with. And you did not stop me. I counter, because that part matters too. That part has always mattered, even if I never said it out loud. and something flickers across his face. Again, something that looks almost like regret, but not quite. Something quieter, more controlled. I thought you had already decided, he says, and that hits harder than I expect, because it is true. I had decided. I had walked in with the conclusion already formed, already convinced that ending it was the best thing for both of us. And I did not ask him what he wanted. I did not wait to see if he would fight for it. I just assumed he would not. And that assumption sits heavily in my chest now, uncomfortable and difficult to ignore. And for a moment neither of us speaks, the silence stretching again, but different this time. Not empty, not uncertain, but filled with something that feels dangerously close to understanding. And I realize with a slow, sinking clarity that this is the part we never had. This conversation, this honesty, this moment where neither of us is pretending it was simple, pretending it was mutual, pretending it was clean, and that realization shifts something inside me, something small but significant, because it means what we had was not as finished as I told myself it was, not as resolved as I needed it to be, and Lucas takes another step closer, just enough to close the space between us a little more, not touching, not crossing any line that cannot be undone, but close enough that I can feel the weight of his presence again, steady and familiar in a way that unsettles me more than anything else. And his voice softens slightly when he speaks again, not weaker, just more direct, more real. I am here now because I am ready to deal with it, he says. And the words carry a weight that goes beyond paperwork, beyond legal ties, beyond anything simple, and I feel my pulse pick up again, not from confusion this time, but from something deeper, something that feels like a question waiting to be answered, because dealing with it does not just mean ending it, not the way he is saying it, not with the way he is looking at me now, and that realization settles into me slowly, steady and undeniable, because it means this is not just about closing something that was left open. It is about deciding what it actually was in the first place, and whether it is really over it all. The word ready lingers in my mind longer than it should, echoing in a way that makes everything else feel slightly out of focus, because it is not just about timing, it is about intention, and I can feel that difference settling into my chest, steady and unavoidable. As I look at him standing there like he has already crossed a line I am only just starting to see, and for a moment I do not speak, not because I do not have anything to say, but because I am trying to understand what that actually means, what he is really asking for without saying it directly. And the realization comes slowly, uncomfortable and sharp at the same time, because dealing with it does not just mean ending it anymore, not with the way he said it, not with the way he is looking at me like this is something that still matters, and I feel my grip tighten on the paper again, grounding myself in something tangible while everything else feels like it is shifting under my feet. Dealing with it does not mean the same thing for both of us. I say finally, my voice steady but lower now, more controlled, because I need to draw that line before it disappears completely, and Lucas watches me carefully, like he expected that, like he has been waiting for me to push back. And there is something almost familiar about that, something that reminds me of the way we used to circle around things instead of addressing them directly, except this time it feels more intentional, more aware. Then tell me what it means for you, he replies. And the question is simple, but it lands heavier than it should, because I have not actually thought that far ahead. I have been reacting, adjusting, trying to catch up to something he has clearly been thinking about for much longer than I have. And I glanced down briefly, gathering my thoughts, forcing myself to stay grounded in the reality I walked into this room with, the one that made sense before he showed up and shifted everything. It means we fixed the legal part, I say, choosing my words carefully, building something solid out of them, something I can stand on. We file what we need to file, we close this properly, and then we move on. And as I say it, I realize how much I need that version of events to be true, how much I need this to be something that can be resolved cleanly, without reopening everything attached to it. And Lucas does not interrupt, does not argue. He just listens, his expression unreadable but focused. And when I finish, there is a brief pause, not empty, just measured, like he is considering my words against something he already knows. And that is enough for you, he says. Not as a question, but not entirely as a statement either. And I nod, even though something in my chest feels uncertain, even though part of me knows that answer is incomplete. It has to be. I add, quieter now, because that is the truth I have been holding on to since he walked in, the one that keeps everything from unraveling completely. And Lucas's gaze softens just slightly, not enough to be obvious, but enough for me to notice. Enough for something in my chest to react before I can stop it. It did not used to be, he says, and that pulls me back immediately, sharp and direct, because it reaches into something I was not ready to revisit, something I thought I had already put away, and I feel my breath catch for just a second, because he is not wrong. There was a time when enough meant something different, when we meant something different, when ending things like this would not have been an option I accepted so easily. And that memory sits heavy in my chest now, quieter but no less real, and I shake my head slightly, trying to push it back, trying to keep this grounded in the present where it belongs. That was before, I say, and the words feel thinner than I want them to, like they do not carry the same certainty they used to, and Lucas steps just a fraction closer again, not enough to cross any line, but enough to make the space between us feel charged, deliberate, like he is choosing to stay in it instead of stepping back. Before what? He asks, and the question is quiet but precise, and I hesitate, because I do not have a clean answer for that, not one that fits into the narrative I have been telling myself, and the silence that follows feels different this time. Not tense, not uncertain, but expectant, like something is about to surface whether I am ready for it or not. And I realize with a slow, unsettling clarity that this conversation is no longer about what we need to fix. It is about what we never actually understood in the first place. And that realization shifts everything again, because it means there is no simple version of this. No clean ending waiting on the other side of a signature. Just the truth we avoided 2 years ago, standing right here between us, asking to be faced. The question lingers in the space between us, quiet but persistent, and I can feel it pressing against everything I have been holding together, everything I have been trying not to unravel since the moment he walked in. Because before what is not a simple question. It is not something I can answer with a clean, controlled sentence. It reaches too far back, touches too many things I deliberately left undefined. And I inhale slowly, steadying myself, forcing my thoughts into something that resembles clarity even though they refuse to stay still. Before I realized it was not enough, I say finally, and the words feel heavier than I expect, like they carry more truth than I have admitted even to myself. And Lucas's expression shifts just slightly, not surprise, not disbelief, but something more subtle, something that looks like he is hearing something he has been waiting to hear for a long time. And that alone unsettles me, because it means this conversation is not just catching him off guard. It is confirming something he already suspected, and I tighten my grip on the paper again, grounding myself in something tangible as I continue. We were good, I add, searching for the right word and finding one that feels incomplete the moment I say it. Because good does not cover everything we were. It does not explain the way things felt when they were right, or the way they unraveled when they were not. It just sits there, vague and insufficient, and Lucas lets out a quiet breath, almost a soundless acknowledgement. We were more than that, he says, and there is no push in it, no attempt to argue, just a correction that feels too precise to ignore. And I glance up at him again, meeting his gaze fully, because avoiding it is no longer an option, not when everything between us is already exposed in ways I did not plan for. Maybe, I admit, and the word feels like a compromise, like something I can offer without giving away too much. But even that feels fragile under the weight of everything else, and there is a pause, not empty, just filled with everything we are still circling around, everything we are getting closer to without quite saying directly. And Lucas shifts slightly, not stepping away, not creating distance, but adjusting just enough that I notice, just enough that it draws my attention to the fact that we are still standing here, still in the middle of a room that no longer feels like it belongs to me, still surrounded by a life that suddenly feels less certain than it did before. And his voice lowers again when he speaks, not softer, just more focused, more deliberate. You left because you thought it was not enough, he says, and I nod once, because that part is true. That part has always been true, even if I never fully explained it, even if I never gave him the chance to respond to it. And you stayed away because you thought I agreed. He continues, and that lands differently, because I have never framed it that way before. I have always seen it as mutual, as something we both understood without needing to say it out loud. And hearing it now makes me question that assumption in a way I am not prepared for. You did not say anything, I point out, but the words feel weaker this time, less certain, because I am starting to see the gap between what I assumed and what actually happened, and Lucas's gaze does not waver, does not soften. It stays steady, grounded in something I cannot easily dismiss. You did not ask, he replies, and the simplicity of it cuts deeper than anything else he has said, because it strips away everything else, every justification, every explanation, and leaves just that one truth, clear and unavoidable, and I feel it settle into my chest, heavy and uncomfortable, because I cannot argue with it. I cannot rewrite it into something easier to accept, and for a moment, I do not speak, because there is nothing to say that does not circle back to the same realization, that we did not end things cleanly. We just stopped in the middle and convinced ourselves it was finished, and now that unfinished space is right here between us again, demanding to be addressed, and I look down briefly, gathering myself, trying to find some version of this that still makes sense, some way to move forward that does not require reopening everything we left behind. But when I look back up at him, the way he is watching me, steady and unwavering, makes it clear that there is no simple path out of this, no clean resolution waiting on the other side, just the truth we never fully faced, and I feel a quiet tension settle into my chest again, not sharp, not overwhelming, just constant, like something that is not going away this time, and I realize with a slow, reluctant clarity that whatever happens next is not just about fixing a mistake, it is about finally finishing something we never truly ended, and I am not sure if that means closing it or starting it again. But the fact that I cannot immediately choose between those two options unsettles me more than anything else so far. The silence that follows does not feel empty anymore. It feels full, dense with everything we have finally said and everything we have not, and I can feel it settling into my chest in a way that is difficult to ignore, because for the first time since he walked in, I am not just reacting, I am understanding, and that understanding is not simple. It does not come with relief or clarity. It comes with weight, with the quiet realization that what we had did not end cleanly because we never actually gave it the chance to end properly. And I exhale slowly, the sound softer than I expect, like something in me is finally catching up to everything that has been said. And when I look at Lucas again, really look at him, I see it more clearly now, not just the control, not just the composure, but the intention behind it, the choice to be here, to say all of this now, to not let it stay unfinished any longer. And that realization shifts something in me, something small but undeniable, because it means this is not just happening to me. It is something he is actively choosing too, and that makes it harder to treat this like a problem I can solve and walk away from. You waited, I say quietly, not accusing, just stating it, because that part matters now, more than it did before, and Lucas nods once, his gaze steady. I needed to be sure, he replies, and the words are simple, but they land with a weight that feels anything but, because being sure implies something more than hesitation, more than unfinished paperwork. It implies a decision, something deliberate, something he took time to understand before acting on it. And I feel my chest tighten slightly at that thought, because I have not had that same time. I have not had the space to process this, to decide what it means for me. And now I am standing here expected to respond to something he has been carrying for months, maybe longer. And that imbalance unsettles me more than I want to admit. Sure of what? I ask, and my voice is quieter now, not sharp, not defensive, just steady, because I need to know what he means before I can decide anything. And there is a brief pause, not hesitation, just a moment where he seems to choose his words carefully, like he knows they matter, like he understands what saying them will change. And when he speaks again, his voice is lower, more deliberate, that I did not want to end it. He says, and the honesty in that lands deeper than anything else so far, because it is not hidden behind logic or practicality. It is not framed as something he had to do. It is something he chose not to do. And that difference matters in a way I cannot ignore, and I feel my breath catch slightly before I can stop it, because that is not something I can easily dismiss, not something I can file away as a mistake or an oversight. It is something intentional, something real, and I glance down briefly, my fingers tightening around the paper again as I try to ground myself. because everything feels like it is shifting under me in a way I am not prepared for. You are saying this now, I point out, and there is a quiet edge to my voice that I cannot completely smooth out after I have already moved on. And the words feel strange as I say them, like they do not hold the same certainty they used to, like something in them is already being questioned, and Lucas's gaze softens just slightly, not enough to be obvious, but enough for me to notice, enough for something in my chest to react before I can stop it. Have you? He asks, and the question is quiet, almost gentle, but it lands heavier than anything else he has said, because it does not challenge me directly. It does not accuse. It simply asks me to look at my own answer. And for a moment I do not respond, not because I do not want to, but because I am not sure I can, not honestly, not without acknowledging something I have been trying to avoid since the moment he walked in, and the silence stretches again, but this time it feels different, not tense, not uncertain, just revealing, like something important has already been said even without words, and I realize with a slow, unsettling clarity that this is the question that matters more than anything else. Not what we were, not how we ended, not even what we need to fix, but whether I actually moved on the way I told myself I did. And the fact that I cannot answer that immediately, the fact that I hesitate, even for a second, tells me more than I am ready to admit. And I look back at him, meeting his gaze fully, because avoiding it is no longer an option, not when everything between us is already laid out like this. And I feel that quiet tension settle deeper into my chest, not overwhelming, just constant, like something that is not going away this time, and I realize that whatever happens next is not going to be simple, not going to be clean, because this is not just about finishing something we left incomplete. It is about deciding what it still means now, after everything, and whether it is something I am willing to face again. The question does not leave the space between us. It lingers, quiet but persistent, pressing against everything I have been trying to hold together, and I can feel it settling deeper the longer I stand here without answering. Because he is not asking for a quick response, he is asking for something real, something honest, and that is exactly what I have been avoiding since the moment he walked in, maybe even before that. And I inhale slowly, the air feeling heavier than it should, like it carries more than just breath, like it carries the weight of everything I am about to admit if I am not careful. And I look at him again. Really look, not at the version of him I remember, not at the version I convinced myself I had moved past, but at the one standing here now, steady and certain in a way that makes it impossible to ignore what he is actually saying, and something in my chest shifts, not sharp, not sudden, just a quiet adjustment that feels more significant than it should. Because it means I am starting to see this differently, not as an interruption, not as a mistake, but as something unfinished that I never properly faced. And that realization is unsettling in a way that does not have a clear direction, because it does not tell me what to do next. It just tells me that whatever I thought was done, was not. And I glance down briefly, my fingers loosening slightly around the paper as I try to gather my thoughts, trying to find something that feels solid enough to say out loud, something that does not unravel the version of my life I have been holding on to. I thought I did. I say finally, and the words feel quieter than I expect, like they do not carry the certainty I used to have when I said them to myself. And Lucas does not interrupt, does not push, he just listens, his gaze steady, waiting, and that makes it harder somehow, because he is giving me the space to answer, honestly instead of forcing something out of me, and I feel my chest tighten slightly as I continue. I thought I moved on. I repeat, more clearly this time, but even as I say it, I can feel the hesitation underneath it, the part that does not fully believe it anymore, the part that has been shifting since he walked in, since he said those first words that disrupted everything I thought I had already settled. And Lucas nods once, acknowledging it without questioning, without challenging, and that simple reaction makes it easier and harder at the same time. Easier because he is not dismissing me, harder because he is not giving me anything to push against, nothing to deflect from, and the silence that follows feels different now. Not tense, not uncertain, but reflective, like it is holding space for something more, something deeper, and I realize with a slow, reluctant clarity that this is the part where I have to decide whether I keep holding onto the version of events that feels safe or whether I admit what is actually happening. What has been happening since the moment he walked in, and I let out a breath I did not realize I was holding. The sound soft but steady, like something in me is finally giving in to the truth I have been circling around. But if I had, I add, my voice quieter now, more honest, this would not feel like this. And the words settle between us, simple but undeniable, because they say more than anything else I have admitted so far. They acknowledge the tension, the pull, the way everything has shifted in a matter of minutes in a way that should not happen if something is truly finished. And Lucas's gaze softens just slightly at that. Not enough to change his expression completely, but enough for me to notice, enough for something in my chest to react before I can stop it. And for a moment neither of us speaks, the silence stretching again, but this time it feels different. Not heavy, not overwhelming, just real, like something important has finally been said out loud. And I feel that quiet tension settle into me in a way that is no longer sharp or unsettling, just present, like something that is not going away this time. And I look at him again, meeting his gaze fully, because there is no point in avoiding it anymore. Not when everything between us has already been laid out like this. So now what? I ask, and the question feels different now. Not about fixing something or closing something, but about understanding what comes next after acknowledging that it was never fully over in the first place. And Lucas exhales slowly, like he has been waiting for that question, like he knew we would get here eventually. And when he speaks, his voice is steady but no longer distant, no longer detached. There is something more in it now, something that feels intentional in a way I cannot ignore. Now we decide if we actually want to end it, he says, and the words land quietly but firmly, settling into the space between us like a choice that cannot be avoided. Because this is no longer about what we should do or what makes sense, it is about what we actually want. And that is a question far more complicated than anything we have faced so far, and I can feel it settle into my chest, steady and undeniable. Because for the first time since he walked in, I realize this is not just about the past. It is about the present, about what we choose now, and whether we are willing to face what that choice really means. The words settle between us with a quiet finality that feels anything but final, because for the first time since he walked in, there is no confusion left, no misunderstanding to hide behind, no simple explanation to cling to, just a choice, clear and unavoidable. And I can feel it pressing against everything I have been holding together, everything I thought was certain just an hour ago, and I stand there for a moment without moving, without speaking, because I know this is the point where something shifts, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that cannot be undone once it happens. And I glance down at the paper still in my hand, the official lines and signatures that started all of this, and it feels almost insignificant now, like it was never really the problem, just the reason we were forced to face something we had been avoiding for far too long. And I exhale slowly, the breath steady but heavier than it should be, because this is not about fixing a mistake anymore. It is about deciding what we actually want, and that is a question I cannot answer the way I thought I could, not after everything that has been said, not after everything I am starting to understand. And I look up at him again, meeting his gaze fully, because there is no point in looking away now, not when everything is already exposed like this. And Lucas does not rush me, does not push, he just waits, steady and certain, like he trusts that I will answer honestly. And that alone makes it harder, because there is no pressure forcing me into a response, just the quiet expectation that I will choose. And I feel something shift in my chest again, not sharp, not overwhelming, just a steady pull that I cannot ignore anymore, because it has been there all along, underneath everything else, underneath the clean ending I told myself we had, underneath the life I built after. And acknowledging it now feels like stepping into something uncertain but real. And I tighten my grip on the paper slightly before loosening it again, letting it rest more lightly in my hand, like I no longer needed to hold everything together. If we end it now, I say slowly, my voice quieter but steady, then this is really it. And the words feel heavier than I expect, like they carry more weight than a simple statement should, because they are not just about paperwork. They are about everything attached to it, everything we shared, everything we left unfinished. And Lucas nods once, his expression calm but no longer distant, no longer detached. Yes, he says simply, and there is no hesitation in it, no attempt to soften it. Just the truth, clear and direct, and I feel that settle into me, steady, and undeniable, because that means there is no coming back from that choice. No second chance hidden behind a technicality. No unfinished thread left to return to later. Just an ending, real and complete this time. And I swallow slightly, my gaze dropping for a brief moment before lifting again, because I need to see him when I say this. I need to know what I am choosing, and the words come slower than I expect, not because I do not know them, but because I am finally letting myself feel what they mean. And if we do not, I continue, and there is a pause, small but significant, because this is the part that changes everything, the part that steps beyond fixing something and into something entirely different. Then we have to figure out what this actually is, and the words settle between us, quiet but firm, because they acknowledge what neither of us has said directly until now, that this is not just about the past, it is about the present, about what we are standing in right now. And Lucas's gaze shifts slightly, something in it deepening, not surprise, not uncertainty, but recognition, like he has been waiting for me to reach this point, this understanding. And for a moment neither of us speaks, the silence stretching again, but it does not feel heavy this time. It feels open, like something has shifted just enough to allow something new to exist in the space between us, and I feel my chest tighten slightly, not from tension, but from the weight of what this means, because this is not a decision I can make lightly, not anymore, not after everything that has surfaced. And I take a slow breath, steadying myself, because whatever I say next will matter in a way nothing else has so far. And I realize with a quiet clarity that I am not standing at the end of something. I am standing at the point where I finally get to choose how it ends, or if it ends at all, and that realization settles into me, steady and undeniable, because it means this time, I cannot walk away without knowing exactly what I am leaving behind. And Lucas is still watching me, still waiting, his presence steady and familiar, in a way that no longer feels like something I need to escape from. And I meet his gaze fully, no hesitation, no distance, because whatever happens next, it is not going to be something we leave unfinished again. And the thought lingers there, quiet but certain, because for the first time since he walked in, I am not trying to fix this, I am trying to understand it, and that makes all the difference.